Shabbat Shalom, everyone, live from the upper room. I am super excited for this one today because we're going to do things a little bit differently. And I apologize for my disheveled look right now. If you watched my previous video on Thursday, you'll know that yesterday my uncle got married. So we were out late last night partying. I got to meet, well, not meet, but I got to reunite with a bunch of my cousins. They all live up in Tampa, so I don't really get to see them that often. It was nice to see them. I saw all of my extended family that's down here. It was a really nice time, but needless to say, it was crazy and fun. My uncle comes from the party side of my family, so everyone was out late drinking, dancing. It was a big soiree, so I'm a bit disheveled at the moment. Just threw on some makeup, took a shower, so my hair still hasn't dried really nice. And I'm wearing one of my favorite shirts. It says, I'm cringe, but I'm free. So I'm not as fancy as I would like to be, but it's all good. And then in regards to what we're doing differently today, but they're the website that I get all of the Parashot listings from. I just discovered that it actually has its own explanation and teachings on the Parashots. So I thought that would be really, really cool to see what they have to say. And from what I was reading beforehand, it seemed like there's some good information in there. And if anyone ever wants to go to this particular website to do their own sort of independent study, I'm putting the website address in the chat right now. And you can go and check out whichever Parashot you want to do, and it gives you the whole entire study on it. A very blessed morning to you, Miss Halsey. Thank you so much for coming, dear friend. Shabbat Shalom. In regards to, I don't know how soon you came in, Halsey, but we're going to be doing things a bit different today. We're still going to read through everything. But like I said, the website that I've been getting all of my Parashot listings from, I just discovered that it does its own sort of little Parashot study and read through too. So we're going to read through the entirety of the Parashot today. And then once we're done, we'll jump over to the website and see what it is that they have to say. A very blessed morning to you, Miss Lisa D. Shabbat Shalom, sister. And Shabbat Shalom to you, Chris. Thank you so much for coming, dear friend. I hope you're doing well, and a blessed Shabbat to you. Oh, you're just saying hello to Chris. Awesome. Good morning, Taylor and Halsey. Glad you had fun. I did, Chris. It was a fantastic time. I wish I could have invited everyone from the BOC family there. My mom's side of the family is super crazy. So needless to say, whenever there's a party, whether it be a wedding, a birthday, a celebratory, just anything worth celebrating, I guess, we go all out. So last night was a load of fun. But when you have a load of fun, the next morning it's a little bit rough. So I'm wearing, like I said, an awesome graphic shirt that says, I'm cringe, but I'm free. I don't have my usual fancy blouse. But it's my favorite shirt. So let me get everything all set up here. Share screen. Today, we got started on it last week. Let's see. We are in 21 through 24. Okay. 1 second. 21, and we're going all the way to 24 today. There we go. Give me just a second to see that everything looks good. It looks like it does. Awesome sauce. Like I said, last week we were touching on the first part of the 10 Commandments, And now this parashot is going to be the next couple of commandments. And that's actually what the name of the parashot means. The name of this parashot is the Mishpatim, which means the judgments. And I should have, like I said, I'm so upset I didn't realize this sooner when I started doing the parashots. I wish I would have been a bit more in depth with each one. Each parashot has a certain name that pertains to what's being said, but we're all living and growing in the grace of God right now. And if we're still here after I finish reading the entire Bible, God forbid, I will be going back into the Torah readings, and we'll keep on reading and reading and reading until the Lord finds it necessary to snatch us away. But yeah, this particular parashot of week 18 is called the Mishpatim. It means judgments, and this is the part of the Torah where it gets into the 613 commandments. So all of the commandments that you don't usually hear about. This is the beginning of it, and it contains about 52 of the 613 commandments all together. Lisa, I liked that site you linked. I look up a lot of words on there. Oh, okay, so you do know about it. Good. So, Lisa, now you know when we do the parashot study, you're able to study ahead of time what the parashot means. And I feel like that's a great tool for anyone who's really serious about learning. But I also caution people to take it with a grain of salt because it's Hebrew for Christians.com. So they're obviously going to try to incorporate all of the Christian mythology into it. And it also takes into account like the Mishnah. And that is a conglomeration of rabbinic stories and philosophies. So that would be considered in the New Testament philosophies and teachings of man. So you always go into it with the mindset of what A.E. Knox says. But overall, from what I've read, there's a lot of great information on there, regardless of who wrote it. And we will go through it together and pick out exactly what's worth taking recognition of and what's worth being put to the side in place of greater truths. So without further ado, let's get started. And again, this is from 21:1 to 24:18. I got to remember that, 24:18. Now these ordinances, which you shall place before them, when you buy a Hebrew servant, 6 years shall he serve you, and in the 7th he shall go forth free gratuitously. If by himself he came, by himself he shall go forth. If he was the possessor of a wife, then his wife will go forth with him. Yet if his Lord should give him a wife, and she bears for him sons and daughters, the wife and her children shall become her lord's, and he may go forth by himself. Yet if the servant should say, yea, say, I love my Lord, my wife, and my sons, I shall not go forth free, then his Lord will bring him close to the Elohim, and bring him close to the door or the jam, and his Lord will bore his ear with an awl, and he will serve him for the eon. And brief pause on this particular paragraph. First and foremost, as you'll notice here, the Elohim is lowercase, which means that the Elohim being talked about here are the official judges of this particular town. So the servant loves the wife that his master gave to him, and he also loves his master. That also is included in there. If he wants to stay in this current state of life and wants to be a servant indefinitely, he will be taken to the judges so that the judges know that he's not being forced to do this against his will. And he will get the mark, for lack of a better words, a piercing that marks him as a slave for the eon. And if you read in the Hebrew, that's the word olam, which is often mistranslated as forever by modern traditionalist Christians. And this particular instance here is one of the proofs that olam cannot mean forever, unless Christians want to argue that there are, in fact, slaves serving their masters right now in Christian mythological heaven. And then that also brings up the awkward conversation of, well, what if the slave was wicked? Would he get a free ticket out of the mythical Christian hell to go and serve his master in heaven? And then the opposite is true. What if the master of the servant became wicked over time and he's in hell? Would the servant then be unfortunate enough to be forced to go to, again, this mythical Christian hell to serve his wicked master because he's a slave forever? And of course, putting aside the fact that everyone who died is dead and will remain dead until the resurrection, and the fact that there is no hell, this word right here, translated eon, is olam, and olam means an indefinite period of time, or for however long the slave lived. And it's classified as an indefinite period of time because you don't know when the slave is going to die. He could live 10 years, 20, 50. He could get kicked in the head by a donkey that afternoon and he's dead. He's no longer that person's slave. So the word olam, there for eon, proves that this cannot mean forever. When a man sells his daughter as a maidservant, she shall not go forth as the manservants go forth. If she is displeasing in the eyes of her lord, who has appointed her for himself, then he will let her be ransomed. To a foreign person, he shall not rule to sell her because of his treachery with her. If he is appointing her for his son, he shall deal with her as is customary with daughters. So he cannot treat her any differently than someone from an outside family coming in. But if she is hired on as a slave or a bondservant, and the master of the house finds that she is a suitable wife for one of his sons, he cannot treat her any differently than he would anyone else. If he is taking another for himself, he shall not diminish her meat, her covering, or her cohabitation. So he has to make sure that if he takes on an additional servant to do the same work that this particular hypothetical woman is doing, he cannot treat her any differently. They have to be taken care of. And there's also a rule in the Hebraic law, and I don't know exactly where it is. I'm sure we'll come upon it soon, where if you are a slave master, you are required by law to make sure that your slaves are taken care of first before you. In other words, if there's a famine and you only have enough food to feed your servants and you are to go hungry, then you are to go hungry. All of your servants, slaves, bond servants, workers, wherever you decide to term this particular group of people, they are to be taken care of first, as well as your animals before you. And it's emphasizing that right here. If he's taking another for himself, meaning another servant, he shall not diminish the previous servant's food, their clothing, or their shelter. If these three things he is not doing for her, then she will go forth gratuitously. There is no money paid. So if he mistreats the female servant, slave, bondservant, whatever you wish to call her, then she is free of charge. No one has to pay the master to have her go free. Basically, if he's caught mistreating her, she is absolutely 110% free to go. The smiter of a man who dies shall be put to get death, yea, death. But if he had no malicious intent, yet the one Elohim, he had fated him into his hands, remember that, then I set for you a place where he shall flee. So basically, this is another beating against free will, because it's saying right here, yet the one Elohim, he had fated him into his hands, meaning God planned for that particular person to die by the hands of this person accidentally. And God is providing them a place to stay to flee from the kinsman redeemer of the one that they killed. And the kinsman redeemer is it's a particular head of the house that is supposed to take care of the entire family. So if someone needs to be ransomed, that particular person does it. A good example would be Rahab, or not Rahab, I apologize. It's Boaz and Ruth. Boaz was Ruth's family's kinsman redeemer. So he would marry the widows of the family to make sure that they were taken care of. And that's how Ruth ended up marrying Boaz. And that's how Naomi ended up getting taken care of as well. Boaz didn't marry her, Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law per se, but because Ruth is the daughter-in-law of Naomi, Naomi by extension gets that additional care from Boaz as the kinsman redeemer. Yeah, in the case, a man was planning arrogantly against his associate as to kill him. So this is first-degree murder. From my altar shall you take him to die. The smiter of his father or his mother, he shall be put to death, yea, death. He who steals a man, whether he sells him or he is found in his hands, he shall be put to death, yea, death. So in the case of someone being taken forcefully into slavery, if you forcefully take them or buy them from someone who has forcefully taken them from their home to be made into slaves, it doesn't matter whether or not you did it or bought it from someone who did it. You are just as guilty as going out and stealing someone. And the penalty for that is death. The one maledicting his father or his mother, speaking badly of them, shall be put to death, yea, death. When men contend and a man smites his associate with a stone or with a fist and he does not die, yet falls into bed, then if he should rise and walk about outside on his support staff, the smiter is held innocent. But for his secession, he shall provide and shall make him heal, yea, heal. So if you have a fight with someone and they end up extremely hurt to the point where they can't properly heal, then you need to provide for them until they have healed. When a man smites his manservant or his maidservant with a club and he dies under his hand, he shall be avenged, yea, avenged. Only if he stands a day or 2 days, he shall not be avenged, for he is his silver. And this also goes with a law in Deuteronomy, where this isn't a master beating their servant because they aren't doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. This is if a maidservant or a manservant breaks the law, and the proper retribution according to law would have been a beating or a whipping. If they institute the punishment and the maidservant or the manservant dies, then the owner is held guilty. When men strive together and strike a pregnant woman, or child comes forth, and no mishap comes to be, he shall be fined, yea, fined. So basically, if they hit a pregnant woman, but the baby is fine, they still have to pay her a fine for the damage that they did to her. Just as the woman's possessor shall impose on him, and he will pay through mediators. Yet if a mishap happens, so if there's a birth defect or there's a miscarriage comes to be, then you will give soul for soul, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, scorching for scorching, injury for injury, welt for welt. So basically, if the kid comes out malformed because of the trauma that was enacted upon them during their time in utero, then the person who struck the mother would have the same injury applied to them. And if the baby miscarried because the pregnant woman got hit, then your life is officially forfeit. When a man smites the eye of his maidservant or the eye of his manservant and ruins it, he shall dismiss him free for his eye. So this also coincides with the, not the previous one, but the one before it, where if you actually ruin a body part of your servants or slaves or bondservants, whatever you wish to call them, then they go free if that particular part of their body is marred. So if you hit them and their eye is no longer usable, they are to go free. If you hit them and break their arm, they are to go free. If you knock out their tooth, they go free. So this makes me believe that the punishments inflicted do coincide with them breaking Mosaic law, not the master per se being a antebellum slave owner, where in the antebellum South, where our slavery happened, you could be a dick at best, a psychopath at worst to your slaves and get away with it. These laws right here go to show me that you can't just up and do whatever the hell you want to your slaves, because if you end up ruining a part of their body from beating them senselessly like an absolute maniac, they go free. And if you beat them so much that they end up dying, you are put to death. So these laws are being put into place right now to care for the slaves and to save the slave masters from getting a big head, so to speak. When a bull gores a man or a woman and he dies, the bull shall be stoned, yea, stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, yet the possessor of a bull shall be held innocent. But if it was a bull given to goring, meaning this is already an aggressive animal, it has a history of being aggressive, as opposed to the bull that was talked about before, where it just ends up snapping one day and kills someone. If there is a bull that is given to goring, i.e., is known to be hostile, and it was testified to its possessor, meaning the owner knows full and well that this animal is crazy, yet he did not keep it in and caused a man or a woman to die, the bull shall be stoned, and moreover, its owner, its possessor, shall be put to death. If a sheltering ransom is imposed on him, then he will give as a ransom for his soul according to all which is set on him. And sheltering ransom. Hold on just one second. I want to make sure that I know what I'm talking about when I talk about this. 21 verse 28. Okay, from the Message translation, just because it's easier to understand what it's being said. If a ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox must be stoned. The meat cannot be eaten by the owner of the ox. Is in the clear. But if the ox has a history of goring and the owner knew it and did not guard against it, then if the ox kills a man or a woman, the ox is to be stoned and the owner given to the death penalty. If a ransom is agreed upon instead of death, he must pay it in full as a redemption for his life. So the owner of the bull can either face the death penalty, or if mercy is bestowed upon him, he could actually pay a ransom for his life instead of dying. And you'll find throughout these that this is applied a lot to a lot of these rules, where there are death penalties, but they can be mercied away by another way. We see the same thing happening in the book of Matthew, where Joseph, it is brought to him that Mary is pregnant. And this is before Gabriel tells him, oh no, it's by the Holy Spirit, she didn't cheat on you. From that standpoint, Joseph thought that Miriam did cheat on him and she could have been liable to have been stoned to death. But he did the alternate ruling, which was divorcing her. So all of these death penalty sins had alternate rulings or alternate fines that could have been done. And this was put on the Jewish people for them to themselves practice mercy. So if someone did something nasty to you, i.e., they had a bull that they knew was violent, and they weren't conscious enough or cared enough to keep it contained or at least at a safe distance from people, and it killed your loved one, you had the opportunity to show mercy on that person's failings by saying, no, we won't ask for his life, but we are going to ask you to pay us this fine. And I recently discovered that there's alternate rulings to death penalties. And a lot of the capital punishments were very hard to inflict onto people because you needed 2 witnesses to something in order for it to actually go through. So yeah, there's a ton of mercy being shown in the scripture verses when you look into them. But if it was given to Goring, shall be put to death. If sheltering ransom is imposed on him, then he will give as a ransom for his soul according to all which is set to him. Whether it gores a son or gores a daughter, according to this custom shall it be done to him. If the bull gores a manservant or a maidservant, 30 shekels of silver shall be given to his lord, and the bull it shall be stoned. So if a servant gets killed, then the owner has to kill the bull and pay the owner of that slave for the lost worker. When a man opens a cistern, so a large well, or a man digs a cistern, yet does not cover it, and a bull or donkey falls therein, the possessor of the cistern shall repay. He shall restore silver to its possessor, and the dead beast shall become his. So he gets to keep the dead animal. When a man's bull strikes the bull of his associate and it dies, then they shall sell the living bull and divide the silver for it. And moreover, they shall divide the dead one. So basically, one person's animal kills another animal. They sell the living animal, split the money, and then the animal that has died, they will divide it. In the case of a bull, that actually makes sense. They get to have a meal, each member of the interaction. For when it is known that it was a bull given to goring, hitherto, meaning, again, this is an animal that is known to be violent, and its possessor did not keep it, he shall repay, repay bull for bull, and the dead one shall become his. And I think that means it's the dead one belongs to the owner of the bull that gored, but let me just... Yeah, the owner of the ox that killed gets to keep the dead animal, but he has to repay the owner of the dead animal for the life that was lost. When a man steals a bull or a flockling and slaughters it or sells it, 5 oxen shall he repay for the bull, and 4 small cattle for the flockling. If the thief is found while borrowing and is smitten so that he dies, there is no blood guilt because of him. But if the sun has risen on him, there is blood guilt because of him. So basically, if you catch a thief in the act at night and hit him and he dies, there's no blood guilt because you have caught him in the act. But if the sun has risen on him and there is blood guilt because of him, basically saying if you haven't caught him, but you spot him the next day with the stuff, you can't just go up and attack him and kill him then and there. You have to have a court trial then, because it's already happened and it's you not preventing the crime from happening, but you're going out and you're vigilanteing. So it's basically saying if he's caught in the act and you defend what's yours and something bad happens to him, all guilt is on him. But if you don't catch him and you spot him the next day with your stuff, you have to take him to court to prove his guilt and your innocence or possessorhood of the thing that he stole. He shall repay, repay. If he has nothing, then he will be sold for his theft. So basically saying he has to then put himself into slavery to pay off what he stole. If the theft is found, found alive in his hand, whether bull or donkey or flockling, then he shall only repay double. When a man causes a field or a vineyard to be grazed down, and he lets his livestock go loose so that it grazes down another's field, then from the best of his field and the best of his vineyard shall he repay. When fire goes forth and finds thorns, and the shock or the raised grain or the whole field is devoured, the one causing the consuming fire to consume shall repay, repay. When a man gives to his associate silver or articles to keep, and they are stolen from the man's house, if the thief is found, he shall repay double. If the thief is not found, then the possessor of the house shall be brought near to the Elohim to show whether or not he has put forth his hand on the work of his associate. And every matter of transgression over a bull, over a donkey, over a flockling, over a remnant, or over every lost thing which one says that this is it unto the Elohim, shall come the word of the two to them. Whom the Elohim shall condemn, he shall repay double to his associate. So basically, if you have something and it's stolen from your house, you have to pay back the person who lent it to you if the thief is not found. When a man gives to his associate a donkey or a bull or a flockling or any beast to keep, and it dies or is broken or is captured without anyone seeing it, the oath of Yahweh, it shall come to be between them both and show whether or not he has put forth his hand on the property of his associate. Then its possessor will take it, and he shall not repay. But if it is stolen, yea, stolen from him, he shall repay its possessor. If it is torn to pieces, yea, torn to pieces, he shall bring the thing torn to pieces as testimony, and he shall not repay. So because that's a little bit hard to understand with the wording, I have the message right here. Let's see. This is 22 verses 7 through 13. If someone gives a neighbor money or things for safekeeping and they are stolen from the neighbor's house, the thief, if caught, must pay back double. If the thief is not caught, the owner must be brought before God to determine whether the owner was the one who took the neighbor's goods. In the cases of stolen goods, whether oxen, donkeys, sheep, clothing, anything in fact missing of which someone says, that's mine, both parties must come before the judges. The one of the judges pronounced guilty must pay double to the other. If someone gives a donkey or a ox or a lamb or any kind of animal to another for safekeeping, and it dies or it is injured or lost and there's no witnesses, an oath before God must be made between them to decide whether one has laid hands on the property or not. The owner must accept this, and no damages are assessed. But if it turns out it was stolen, the owner must be compensated. If it has been torn by wild beasts, meaning a wild animal came in and absolutely destroyed, for instance, a sheep, then the torn pieces must be brought in as evidence. No damages have to be paid. So if a wild animal ends up coming in and gets it, that's not the fault of the one holding on to the sheep for safekeeping. When a man asks something from his associate and it is broken or dies, then its possessor is not with it. He shall repay, yea, repay. If the possessor was with it, he shall not repay. If it was hired, it came for its hire. So again, back to this. If someone borrows an animal from a neighbor and it gets injured or dies while the owner is not present, he must pay for it. But if the owner was with it, he doesn't have to pay. If the animal was hired, the payment covers the loss. In case a man entices a virgin who is not his betrothed, and he lies with her, he shall pay for her bride price as a wife for himself. If her father refuses to give her to him, he shall weigh out silver according to the bride price for virgins. So the idea that if someone sleeps with another, they have to marry them, that is reneged if the father refuses to give the daughter to this person. So the father can prevent a daughter from marrying her rapist, but they would still have to pay the bride price. And even though rape isn't necessarily within view here, this is someone who seduces a woman and she loses her virginity willingly. The father can refuse to have his daughter marry that person, and by extension, anyone, meaning it doesn't matter if she willingly lied with him or not, or if she was raped or not. The father can have a say in whether or not he gives his daughter to anyone. But the fact still remains that whether or not this person marries the daughter, they still have to pay the loss of her virginity. And sometimes that means selling yourself into slavery and working for this family until that bride price has been fully accounted for. You shall not let a enchantress live. Anyone laying with a beast shall be put to death, yea, death. Anyone sacrificing to any Elohim, he is doomed, unless it be to Yahweh and to him alone. As for the sojourner, you shall not tyrannize nor oppress him, for you came to be sojourners in the land of Egypt. And remember, this is why God put the Hebrews into slavery in Egypt for so long. He wanted to make sure that they knew exactly what it was like to be a sojourner and a slave and an oppressed person in a different land, so that they wouldn't treat other people that way, since it was so prevalent back in that day. Any widow or orphan you shall not humiliate. If you humiliate, yea, humiliate him, in case he should cry, yea, cry out to me. I shall hear, yea, hear his cry, and my anger will grow hot, and I will kill you with the sword, and your wives will become widows, and your sons will become orphans. If you obligate my people and humble with you with silver, you shall not be as a money lender to him. You shall not impose interest on him. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding what that says correctly. If you lend money to my people, to any of the down and out among you, don't come down hard on them and gouge them with interest. So basically saying, don't lend and put interest on someone who's already having a difficult time. Give it to them without the interest. If you take and pledge, yea, and pledge the remnant of your associate previous to sunset, you shall restore it to him. For it is his only covering. It is his remnant for his skin, wherein shall he lie? When it comes to be that he is crying out to me, then I will hear, for I am gracious. Back to this. If you take your neighbor's coat as security, give it back before nightfall, and maybe your neighbor's only covering. What else does the person have to sleep in? And if I hear the neighbor crying out from the cold, I'll step in. I am compassionate. You shall not maledict the Elohim and the prince among your people. You shall not curse. So basically, don't curse the officials of your particular town. Don't curse the rulers above you, whether they be judges, whether they be princes, kings, presidents, governors. And this is further emphasized in the New Testament, where it says, pray for your leaders so that you may be living mild and peaceful lives. You shall not delay to offer from your fullness and your fruit juice. The firstborn of your sons shall you give to me. So shall you do with your bull and your flock and your donkey. 7 days it shall be with his mother. On the 8th day shall you give it to me. So again, this is what we read previously in Exodus, where God claims a particular possessorship over the firstborn of every human and animal. And a person can be bought back, so to speak. There's a redemption price to where the firstborn no longer has to dedicate their lives to serving God in the absolute sense. That was covered, I think, by the Levitical priesthood. So you give the money to the priesthood, and the priesthood as a whole acts on behalf of the firstborn. The firstborn is no longer obligated to do the firstborn obligations. And that's something I have to study a bit more, because when you're chosen by God, you have to dedicate, or not have to, you're not forced to, but it's definitely entwined into your life by the grand author to live your life to God and to serve him. I myself am a firstborn, and I find that to be very, very accurate doing what I do on YouTube. The firstborn of your sons you shall give to me. You do with the bull and with your flock and with your donkey. 7 days it shall be with its mother. On the 8th day shall you give it to me. You shall come to be holy men for me. So you shall not eat flesh torn to pieces in the field. You shall fling it to the dogs. So don't eat roadkill. Seems like a fair rule. 23, you shall not carry a unfounded report. So basically, don't lie. Do not set your hand with a wicked man to become a malicious witness. So if you're brought before a court to verify whether or not someone's guilty or innocent. Don't bring bullshit. You shall not come after the many to do evil, and you shall not respond in the contested manner to turn aside after the many, to turn aside right judgment. Neither shall you favorably honor the poor man in his contested manner. So this is actually very interesting. God actually tells you not to give more favor to a poor man. So in the eyes of the law of Moses, it's just as wicked to favor someone who is in a lesser position as it is to favor someone who is in a higher, more powerful position. So if you give more favor to the powerful one because they're more privileged, you're doing wrong. If you give more favor to the poor because they are, for lack of a better words, in a oppressed state or a less powerful state, if you give more favor to them, it is just as wicked according to the law of Moses. You're supposed to treat everyone fair. In case you come upon the bull of your enemy or his donkey going astray, you shall return it to him. In case you see the donkey of the one hating you reclining under its load, then you will halt from forsaking him with it. You shall set free along with him. You shall not turn aside the judgment of your needy one in his contested manner. From a false charge you shall keep far, and the innocent and the righteous one you shall not kill, for I shall not justify the wicked one. You shall not take a bribe, for a bribe is blinding the unclosed eyes, and it's subverting the word of the righteous. You shall not oppress a sojourner, for you know the soul of the sojourner, for you came to be sojourners in the land of Egypt. 6 years shall you sow your land, and you will gather its yield. But on the 7th you shall release it and abandon it, that the needy of your people may eat, and the field animals shall eat their leavings. So shall you do with your vineyard and with your olive trees. So this was a interesting little caveat here. You would let the land not only rest, but anyone who was in the down and out on the 7th year could go into this abandoned field where fruit would still be growing, and they could take whatever they want, them and the animals of the field. It would be equivalent to planting apple trees in cities so that the homeless never go hungry. And when you're working the field and it's operative, the outer edges were supposed to be left to anyone who was in the down and outs and needed food. So you would actually save 10% of your land for anyone who couldn't afford or didn't have the ability to make their own food, and they could come and take that. 6 days shall you do your tasks. On the 7th day you shall cease, and your bull and your donkey may rest, and the son of your maidservant and the sojourner may be refreshed. So the Sabbath also applied to the slaves and to anyone who was coming in. They weren't required to do, they were required also to refrain from work on those days as well. You shall beware in all that I say to you, and the name of other Elohim you shall not mention. Let it not be heard coming out of your mouth. 3 times shall you celebrate to me in the year. You shall observe the festival of unleavened bread. 7 days shall you eat unleavened bread, just as I instructed you. At the appointed time in the month Abib, for in it you went forth from Egypt. And I think Abib is April. And none shall appear before me empty-handed. Also observe the festival of the harvest of the first fruits of your yields from what you are sowing in the field. And observe the festival of the ingathering at the going forth of the year, when you gather your yields from the field. 3 times in the year every male of you shall appear before the Lord Yahweh. You shall not offer the blood of my sacrifice with what is leavened, nor shall the fat of my festival lodge until the morning. You shall bring the first of the first fruits of your ground to the house of Yahweh your Elohim. You shall not cook a kid in the milk of its mother. And this is a kosher rule, meaning you cannot have meat and dairy together. So you couldn't have a hamburger with a milkshake. You cannot have a cheeseburger or a, well, you definitely can't have a ham sandwich with cheese. So they considered the cook aspect to be eaten with. And for a while I did try to keep kosher, and it was okay. I mean, I'm a big fan of cheeseburgers. I don't keep kosher anymore because all is clean now. But uh, yeah, it's definitely a different way of eating. And people who are very observant Jews who keep kashrut, which is just the kosher laws, have two different sinks and two different washing machines and two different sets of eating utensils so that they never touch. So this is that's a perfect example of the traditions of man and going further beyond what God intended. And I was best friends when I was younger with a family that had a kosher kitchen. I can't recall whether or not they had separate washing machines, but I do know that they kept everything pretty segregated and separate. And there's this one woman who I watch online called Froom It Up, and she is very observant. She goes the whole 9 yards. She has a different cutting board for milk and meat. She has two different sinks, two different washing machines, different sets of utensils, different towels that she dries them off with. And yeah, she goes all out and making sure everything is cut and dry separate, even having different plates. And I just think that that's crazy. Behold, I shall be sending a messenger before you to keep you in the way and to bring you into the place which I have prepared. Guard yourselves in view of him and hearken to his voice. Do not embitter him, for he shall bear with your transgression, for my name is within him. In case you should hearken, yea, hearken to his voice and do all that I am speaking, then I will be an enemy of your enemies, and I will be a foe to your foes. For my messenger shall go forth before you, and he will bring you to the Amorite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Canaanite, the Gershite, the Hevite, and the Jebusite, and I will suppress them. You shall not bow yourselves down to their Elohim, nor be made to serve them, nor shall you accord to their deeds, for you shall demolish, yea, demolish them, and break them down, yea, break down their monuments. You will serve Yahweh your Elohim, and he will bless your bread and your water, and I will take away illness from among you. None shall come to be miscarrying or barren in your land. I shall make the number of your days full. Now, keep on listening to the blessings he's promising here. I shall send the dread of me before you. I will discomfit all the people against whom you shall come, and I will make all your enemies turn the nape of your necks to you. I will send the hornet before you, and it will drive out the Hivite, the Canaanite, and the Hittite from before you. I shall not drive them out from before you in 1 year, lest the land should become desolate, and the field animal may be many against you. Little by little shall I drive them out from before you until you are fruitful and you are allotted the land. Do you hear, as of right now, a promise of eternal life or a promise of eternal damnation for following or not following these laws yet? Keep that in mind as we go through all of the rules. Never once does God promise eternal life for following the commandments. Every single blessing that he gives is for this lifetime and for a chance to rule in the millennial kingdom. But even then, he doesn't promise the millennial kingdom in this. He promises human fertility. He promises animal fertility, protection, their fruit being good, health. So keep that in mind. Keep on listening for you shall receive eternal life for following the commandments. And I shall set your boundaries from the sea of weeds unto the sea of the Philistines, and from the wilderness unto the stream. For I shall give into your hand the dwellers of the land, and you will drive them out from your presence. You shall not contract a covenant with them or with other Elohim. They shall not dwell in your land, lest they should make you sin against me, so that you serve other Elohim, and that it should come to be a trap for you. And boy, does it in the coming books. Then to Moses he said, ascend to Yahweh, you and Aaron, Nadab and Abinu, the 70 of the elders of Israel, and you will bow yourselves down from afar. Yet Moses, he alone, will come close to Yahweh, but they shall not come close, and the people, they shall not ascend with him. So Moses came and related to the people all the words of Yahweh and all the ordinances. Then all the people responded with one voice, saying, all the words which Yahweh has spoken, we shall do. Famous last words. Now Moses wrote all the words of Yahweh. Then he rose early in the morning and built the altar below the mountain and the 12 stone monuments for the 12 tribes of Israel. When he sent youths of the sons of Israel, and they brought up ascent offerings and sacrificed young bulls as peace offerings to Yahweh, Moses took half of the blood and put it in goblets, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And he took the scroll of the covenant and read it in the ears of the people. So they say, all that Yahweh has spoken, we shall hearken to. Now Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people and said, behold, the blood of the covenant which Yahweh contracts with you concerning all of these words. Then Moses and Aaron, Nahab, Abinu, and 70 of the elders of Israel ascended, and they saw the Elohim of Israel, and beneath his feet, as it were, a work of sapphire tealing, as the very heavens for purity. To the select men of the sons of Israel, he put not forth his hand, and they perceived the one Elohim, and ate and drank. Yahweh said to Moses, ascend to me to the mountain and be there, and I shall give to you the stone tablets, the law and the instructions which I wrote to direct them. So Moses and Joshua, his minister, rose, and Moses ascended to the mountain of the one Elohim. And to the elders he said, wait for us in this place until we return to you. And behold, Aaron and Hur are with you. Anyone who has matters, let him come close to them. When Moses ascended into the mountain, the cloud covered the mountain, and the glory of Yahweh tabernacled over the Mount Sinai. The cloud covered it 6 days. Then Yahweh called to Moses on the seventh day from the midst of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of God was like a devouring fire on the summit of the mountain to the eyes of the sons of Israel. So Moses entered into the midst of the cloud and ascended into the mountains. Moses came to be on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. And that concludes the Torah portion of this particular parashot. Let's see what people are saying. I like that you sent the link. I look up those words. Okay. Hello, Lisa D. I was not looking at the chat for a few minutes. Stay away from bulls. Yeah, I don't mess with bulls. Even if they're peaceful, they're easily spooked. I would not suggest messing with them. Brother Vet, Shabbat Shalom, brother. Thank you so much for coming. Outstanding scrolling message across the screen. Yes, I find it expedient now to have that, because whenever you jump into the Torah, it is very, very heavily kingdom territory oriented. And even though it is meant for the body of Christ's edification and our message, the enemy uses it to try to bring us back into law, even though no flesh can subject itself to God's law, Romans 8:7-9. Because at the time, this was the truth. But as time went on, we discovered more and more of the truth, that not only was this made to bring about more indignation, the flesh can't cover it anyway. But Israel at the time had to, at the very least, think that they were able to do it, so that God can show the entire world, hey, even humans at their best trying this cannot accomplish it. So yeah, I found that the scrolling at the bottom, Brother Vet, is very, very helpful when touching upon both the Torah and the circumcision letters in the New Testament. And we have Miss Deborah here. Shabbat Shalom, dear sister. Thank you so much for coming. And with that being said, we're going to jump over to the next part, which is Jeremiah. And you guys are going to love this one. Hold on. You get all set up. And I believe it's going to be Jeremiah. Let's see. Which chapters? 34, 8-22. And then it actually goes back to chapter 33. And wait until you guys see this. Let's see. 34, 8-22. All right, here we go. The word which came to Jeremiah from Yahweh after King Zedekiah contracted a covenant with all the people who were in Jerusalem to proclaim to them liberty, that each man sending his servant, each man his maidservant, who is a Hebrew or a Hebrewess, free, so as not to force service on them, any man on his Jewish brother. So a covenant was made after the death, or I'm sorry, this wasn't when Zedekiah died. This was the King Zedekiah making a decree, a covenant with the people to proclaim liberty to all of the Jewish servants. They were to go free from any sort of slavery that they were imparted on. So they hearkened, all the chief officials and all the people who entered into the covenant. Each sent his maidservant and his manservant free, so as not to force service on them any longer. They hearkened and dismissed them. Yet afterwards, they turned around and they caused the servants and the maidservants to return whom they had freed, and they brought them into bondage as servants and maidservants. So they actually went back on this covenant. All of the people that they said, you're now free, they actually brought back into servitude at this time. Then the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah from Yahweh, saying, Thus says Yahweh Elohim of Israel, I myself contracted a covenant with your fathers in the day I brought them forth from the land of Egypt, from the house of servants, saying, At the end of 7 years you shall dismiss each man his brother Hebrew, who has sold himself to you and has served you 6 years. And you shall dismiss him from you free. So we just touched on that law in Exodus. Yet your fathers did not hearken to me, nor did they stretch out their ear. And you, for your part, turned about for a while, and you were doing what is upright in my eyes by proclaiming liberty, each man to his associate, and you contracted a covenant before me in the house over which my name is being called. Yet now you're turning about and profaning my name, and are causing to return each man to his servant, and each man his maidservant, whose souls you had dismissed free. And you are bringing them into bondage to become your servants and your maidservants. God doesn't like the fact that they're making them slaves again. Therefore, thus says Yahweh, you yourself shall have not hearkened to me by proclaiming liberty, each man to his brother and each man to his associate. Behold, I shall proclaim to you liberty, of various Yahweh, to the sword, to the plague, and to the famine. And I will make you a steering horror to all the kingdoms of the earth. I will make the men, the trespassers of my covenant, who do not carry out the words of the covenant, which they contracted before me, like the calf which they cut in two and passed between its sundered parts, the chief officials of Judah and the chief officials of Jerusalem, the court officials and the priests and all the people of the land who passed between the sundered parts of the calf. So basically, he's saying, you guys made a promise, you broke it, time to face the consequences. I will give them into the hand of their enemies and into the hand of those seeking their soul. And their carcasses will be food for the flyer of the heavens and the beasts of the earth. And Zedekiah, king of Judah, and his chief officials, I shall give into the hand of their enemies, and into the hand of those seeking their soul, and into the hand of the army of the king of Babylon, which has moved away from you. Behold, I shall give instruction of various Yahweh, and I will bring them back to the city. They will fight against it and seize it and burn it with fire. In the cities of Judah, I shall make a desolation without a dweller. So it seems pretty dire here. They broke the covenant that they made to let all of the Hebrew slaves go free. They brought them back. God didn't like it. He says, here's the punishments for it. And it's very interesting. This part right here is also included in the Parashot. We're supposed to go up to this part right here and read 25 and 26. Listen to this. Thus says Yahweh, if my covenant with day and night did not stand, if I did not set the statutes of the heavens and the earth, then I shall also reject the seed of Jacob and David, my servant, from taking of his seeds rulers for the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Indeed, I shall reverse their captivity. I will have compassion on them. So let me read that now from the Message. And you'll see what I'm not what I'm saying, but what this is saying. Verse 25 and 26. Well, here's God's response. If my covenant with day and night wasn't in working order, if sky and earth weren't functioning the way I set them going, then, but only then, you may ask, or you might think, I had disowned the descendants of Jacob and of my servant David, and that I would set up any of David's descendants over the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But as it is, I will give them back everything that they lost. The last word is, I will have mercy on them. So this is God basically saying, it doesn't matter that they're being punished right now. What I promised them will stand. And not only what I promised them will stand, but I will give them back everything that I have taken from them, because the last word of God is, in fact, I will have mercy on them. This is another salvation of all proof for me. And the fact that the Parashot has us read this punishment and then jump up to the ending of the previous chapter that says this, I indeed shall reverse their captivity. I will have compassion on them, just goes to show that any punishment that God inflicts on his people or any people in general is 100% meant for their edification, not their destruction and just their destruction. And with that being said, we're going to jump over to the New Testament portion now. Concordant. And the New Testament portion for this is Matthew 5:38 through 42. Oh, and I see why they included this in this parashot. Okay, chapter 5, verse 38 through 42. 38. You hear that it was declared an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Yet I am saying to you, not to withstand a wicked person, but anyone who slaps you on your right cheek, turn him the other also. And he who wants to sue you and obtain your tunic, leave him your cloak also. And anyone who conscripts you 1 mile, go with him 2. To him who requests you, give, and from him who wants to borrow from you, you may not turn. You hear what that it is was you hear that it was declared, you shall be loving your associate and you shall be hating your enemy. Yet I am saying to you, love your enemies and pray for those who are persecuting you, so that you may become sons of your Father who is in the heavens. For he causes his sun to rise on the wicked and the good, and makes it rain on the just and the unjust. For if ever you should love those who are loving you, what wages have you? Are not the tribute collectors also doing the same? And if ever you should greet your brothers only, what are you doing that is excessive? Are not those of the nations also doing these things? You then shall be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. And I think this further emphasizes and shows that all of these laws were given so that the people would be able to display mercy. And again, this is also to show that none is righteous, no, not one. And so that God can have mercy on all, but we're also called in the absolute sense, the wider sense, the completed puzzle, to have mercy on people. Because at the time they only had bits and pieces where God said, here's what's wrong, here's the punishments for them. In the book of Isaiah, it goes to show exactly how God behaves, because he inflicted punishments on Israel for their edification and then promised right afterwards, his last word is his mercy, that he would return everything to him. And now you have Jesus saying explicitly, have mercy on these people who do wrong to you. So it's a beautiful picture from beginning to end that shows and encompasses the entirety of mercy, what it is, and encouraging us to behave as our Heavenly Father does, which is if you need to enact a retribution, do it, but do it with mercy. Do it with love in your heart. And with that being said, I want to jump over quickly to the website and read a little bit from there, if you guys would be so gracious as to let me do that, because I think I may do this from now on if my throat doesn't get too sore, because this is full of fantastic information in regards to the Parashots. So Parashot Torah reading, Parashot Mishpatim, or judgments. And this is what we're supposed to read. This bottom portion here is optional. I'm not exactly sure why it was paired, because later on we will be reading a portion of the Parashot that includes this. So we just covered this portion for today. Last week's Torah portion, Yitro, which is the Hebrew name for Jethro, explained that exactly 7 weeks after the Exodus from Egypt, or 49 days after the Great Passover, Moses gathered the Israelites at the foot of Mount Sinai to enter into the covenant with the Lord. In a dramatic display of thunder, lightning, billowing smoke, and fire, the Lord descended upon the mountain and recited the 10 Commandments to the people. Upon hearing the law's categorical requirements, however, the people shrank back in fear and begged Moses to be their mediator before the Lord. The people then stood afar, while Moses alone drew near to the thick darkness to reveal the various laws and rules from the Lord. This Torah portion begins with Moses in the midst of the thick darkness of Sinai, receiving additional instruction regarding civil law for the Israelite people. It begins with the Lord saying to Moses, "Now these are the judgments that you shall set before them." Well, a well-known Jewish midrash says that the Lord initially offered the Torah to each of the 70 nations, but none accepted it without first asking what it was about. After hearing the various commandments, each nation had some excuse or another for not accepting it. For example, when God offered it to the Ishmaelites, they declined the offer because it prohibited theft, and their trading practices required that. God finally turned to the nation of Israel, who said, "Kol asher deber Adonai nahaseh." All that the Lord says we shall do. And again, this is the famous last words. And knowing what we know now, this wasn't, in fact, as easy as they made it sound to be. Note something remarkable here. Unlike the other nations, Israel chose Torah before knowing its context. See Exodus 19, verse 8 for reference. In fact, even after Moses had explained the extent of the Torah's demands, all Israel said, "Kol asher deber Adonai nahaseh v'neshmaya." All that the Lord says we will do and obey. Again, we know now that it wasn't possible for them to, although I'm sure that when they said it, they meant it at the time, the same way Peter meant it when he said he would die alongside Jesus, but because he was weak in the flesh and because prophecy had to be fulfilled, that didn't happen. The heart of the Jew unquestioningly said yes to the Lord like a child who trusts his father. The word mishpatim means rules or ordinances and is derived from the Hebrew word shafat, or to judge. Parashot Mishpatim is sometimes called Sefer HaBrit, the Book of the Covenant, since it contains over 11.5% of all of the mitzvot, or commandments, found in the entire Torah, or 53 of the 613. This Mishpatim includes a wide range of civil laws, criminal laws, ritual laws, financial laws, and family laws. These civil laws are sometimes referred to as Benin Adam Lehavero, or between man and his fellow man. For instance, slavery was socially tolerated, but it was to be practiced in a humane and orderly manner. If a Jewish male was to be sold into slavery as restitution for theft, he must be freed after no more than 6 years of servitude. If he got married during his servitude, his master was required to support his wife and children. On the other hand, if the master gave a slave a wife during his servitude, she and the children would remain with the master after he was freed, unless the man decided to remain with them, in which case he would make a solemn declaration before the Bet Din, or the law court, and have his ear bored with an awl to indicate that he is now part of the master's clan. So you actually became a part of the family as the worker. If a Jewish girl was sold into slavery by her father, she was not automatically freed after 6 years of servitude, but must be redeemed from her master. The sages state that a man could sell his daughter until she reached the age of 12 years of age, but only if it was for her benefit, with the intent that she was to be married to her master or the master's son. So the marriage right here, it turns out, was implied. So this is just another form of marrying off your daughter. That's interesting. If she displeased her master, she could not be resold to a foreigner, but must be redeemed or purchased back by her own relatives, probably her kinsman redeemer. If she was married to the master or his son, then she was to be treated as a freeborn Jewish woman with all of the same rights attending to that role in Jewish society. If a master struck and killed his non-Jewish slave, he was to be punished by the Bet Din, or the court of law. However, if the slave died several days after being beaten, he was not found liable because it is assumed that he did not intend to actually kill the slave. If the slave was permanently injured by the beating, however, he was to be set free. And again, in Deuteronomy, it's alluded back to this particular law that this was punishment inflicted for commandments broken, not the slave master being a psychopath. Some laws carried the death penalty. These included premeditated murder, cursing one's parents, kidnapping, practicing witchcraft, engaging in bestiality, and offering sacrifices to idols. According to various Hatzal, which is Jewish sages, the famous statement, Ayin Tachat Ayin, Shen Atach Shen, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, actually refers to the administration of equitable justice and redress of damages and not corporal punishment. Other laws and ordinances concern cases of personal injury, the treatment of strangers, or the gurim, or the goy. Widows and orphans, laws about loans, which must be interest-free between Jews, and various other matters, including the dedication of the firstborn, or the Bet Harom, to the Lord, the prohibition of bearing false witness, the restriction against eating trif, which is meat of an animal torn by beasts in the field, or roadkill, the law of Shemitah, or Shemitah, which is the 7th year during which the land was to lie fallow, the complete abstinence of work on Shabbat, the 3 pilgrimage festivals, Shalosh Regalim, which is Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, the prohibition of boiling a kid in its mother's milk, from which all sorts of restrictions were derived later in the rabbinical formations of kashrut, and so on. After giving these various mitzvot, the Lord promised Moses that his angel, Malach Adonai, would guard and protect the Israelites until they arrived in the land of Canaan, but on the condition that the people obeyed his voice. This angel would drive out the enemies of Israel and assure their victory in the promised land. The Messianic believers would hold that Malach Adonai was none other than Yeshua, the Messiah, in the pre-incarnated state. I would say that that's... I could see that being true, personally. As mediator of the covenant, Moses next reported to the Israelites all the words of the Lord and all of the mishpatim, and the people responded in unison, Kol hadavarim asher deber Adonai na'aseh. All the words which the Lord has said we will do. When he wrote down the words of the covenant, built an altar at the foot of Mount Sinai with 12 pillars, one for each tribe of Israel, and ordered sacrifices to the Lord to be made. Then he took the sacrificial blood from the offerings, threw half upon the altar, and read the covenant to the people. The people ratified the covenant with the words, Kol asher deber Adonai nahaseh v'nishma. All that the Lord says we will do and obey. Upon hearing their ratification, Moses took the other half of the sacrificial blood and threw it onto the people, saying, Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you in accordance with all these words. Next, Moses, Aaron, and his sons, Nadab and Abinu, the 70 of the elders of Israel, ascended the mountain to eat a covenant affirmation meal between Kalal Israel and the Lord. It was there that the elders beheld the awesome glory of Elohi Israel, or the God of Israel, under whose feet was a pavement of sapphires like the very heavens for clearness. After entering from the mountain with the elders, the Lord commanded Moses to go back up and receive Lachot Ha-Evin, or the tablets of stone inscribed with the Ten Commandments, followed by Joshua, who remained down below. Moses reascended the mountain, which was still covered by the shining cloud of fire. On the seventh day there, he heard the voice of the Lord calling to him from the midst of the cloud of glory, and then entered into the presence of the Lord. He remained on the mountain a total of 40 days and 40 nights while the Israelites waited for him at the camp down below. Note about the oral and written Torah. The Jewish sages traditionally count 53 distinct commandments in this portion of the Torah, easily making it one of the most legalistic or law-focused sections of the entire Bible. Civil laws, liability laws, criminal laws, agricultural, financial, family purity, Sabbath, and holiday laws are given in this portion. The various social and civil laws are called mishpatim, the plural form of the masculine noun mishpat, meaning a judgment, ordinance, law, or legal ruling. The word derives from the verb shafat, meaning to judge or to govern. A shafet is the Hebrew word for judge, and the Lord is called Ha-Shafet Kol Ha'aretz, or the judge of all the earth, who loves justice. In this connection, we note that the application of the mishpat became the basis for the traditional application of Jewish case law, as well as for the halakha. Recall that the idea of establishing a legal system with courts, judges, and officers was derived from Yitro, or Jethro's, advice given to Moses in last week's Torah portion. Moses chose God-fearing men from all over Israel and appointed them as leaders over the people. He put them in charge of groups of 1,150 and 10. So this is how the judges would take care of things. Everyone down here would handle the small issues. And then as the issues got more and more pressing, they would travel up until they got to Moses. Moses would be the Supreme Court, if you were to think of how the United States court system works. In Jewish thinking, there are two Torahs, the written and the oral. The written refers to the 5 books of Moses, usually taking in the form of a Sefer Torah, or the Torah scroll, or a Chumash, which is a book. So this would be considered a Chumash. Book form of the 5 books of Moses. Oral Torah refers to the word of mouth tradition of learning something. The idea is that God first spoke the words to Moses and then Moses responded. That is, before the actual writing down of the words of God, there was a dialogue. In rabbinic tradition, oral Torah is considered more vital than the written Torah, which I would say that the rabbinic tradition is the work of man. This is man's tradition. So I hold more to the written word personally as a believer. The rabbis say that oral Torah was also received by Moses from God on Mount Sinai and carries as much authority as the written Torah. Moreover, this Torah was passed down through the centuries by word of mouth rather than by the written word. Eventually, this oral material was written down, beginning around the year 200 AD and culminating in the written oral Torah called the Talmud, or learning. And don't confuse the Talmud with the Tanakh. The Tanakh is the 5 books of Moses and the entirety of the Old Testament. So Joshua all the way through, I always forget the last book. Let's see. There is no table of contents in the Message Bible. One second. So the Tanakh would be the 5 books of Moses, and then Joshua all the way through to the last book in the Old Testament, which would be Malachi. So that's the Tanakh. The Talmud is basically all of the rabbinic sages' teachings and the traditions of men and the additional laws added on to the laws of Moses over time. So that would be what Jesus was arguing against, all of the additional rules that the Jews put onto God's original Torah would have most likely came out of the Talmud, which consists with the Mishnah, which is just another book of rabbinic teachings. And again, I've used the Mishnah as examples for truth in teaching, because I do believe that there is a grain of truth in some of the Mishnah teachings, such as when God drowned the entirety of the Egyptian army, he rebuked the angels for celebrating. And I feel like that is true based on what we are told of God's character and his intention for his enemies in the consummation. Note that the oral Torah is 50 times the size of the written Torah. And now here's the oral Torah and all of its applications. And then the written Torah, which would be what we just read, has the mitzvot, the mishpatim, the chukim, and the idot, or the testimonials. So this would be what God intended. This would be all of the other stuff added on later by man. Because it derives from the discussion of the Mishnah, the Talmud is also traditionally called the Shas, an acronym for Shisha Shadirim, or the 6 orders of the Mishnah. There exist 2 versions of the Talmud: the Jewish Talmud, or the Yerushalayim, which was compiled around 350 AD, and the Babylonian Talmud, or the Bavili, the most frequently used version, which was compiled around 500 AD. Within the Mishnah are 2 different types of literature. The first is known as the Halal, or the legal literature. The Halalic literature interprets written Torah and seeks advice to establish judicial laws, both civil and religious, that consists of codes of behavior and religious practice and procedures. For instance, the law of marriage and divorce and ethics of giving charity. The second type of literature is known as the Agada and is all material contained in the Talmud that is not halakha. It consists of wise sayings or tellings of the sages. So again, teachings and traditions of man. The Agada includes stories, parables, theological or ethical statements, and homilies. And I think the parable of the rich man and Lazarus was derived from one of the parables that's in this. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's where one of the parables, I think that's where the parable for the rich man and Lazarus was inspired from. Note that within the Talmud itself, both Agada and the Halacha may be found mixed together, often with the Agada used to teach a principle based upon the halakhic texts. And now for the Haftorah portion. The Haftorah reading is from the prophet Jeremiah, provides a stark contrast to this week's Parashot. Mishpatim opens with the commandments about releasing slaves, but the reading from Jeremiah reports how the people of Judah betrayed the Hebrew slaves of their day. King Zedekiah had earlier made a covenant with the people to free all the Hebrew slaves according to the 7-year cycle of permissible slavery mentioned in Exodus, hoping that by doing so, God would be merciful and spare Judah from the Babylonian invasion. After a while, it appeared that the Babylonians were not going to attack Jerusalem, and the crisis seemed to pass. Treacherously, however, the former slave owners reneged on their covenant and took back their slaves. The word of the Lord then came to Jeremiah. God rebuked the people for their perfidy and pronounced judgment upon them. Instead of withdrawing from Judah, the Lord will now bring the Babylonians back, and they will raise Jerusalem and all the cities of Judah entirely. And it goes back to the particular portion where it says that. Note that the last 2 verses of the Haftorah were added by the sages to soften the message and to provide hope. Ki yesh tikva, for there is hope always for Israel, since God's sovereign purposes are fixed according to the counsel of his good pleasure. Exactly. And I feel like that was a God-inspired thing that they did. That wasn't just the sages going, oh, let's soften the message a bit. I sincerely think that that was God-inspired to show how God operates, because that is, in fact, how God operates throughout the entirety of the Bible. He brings judgment, suffering and change happens, and they're brought back to him. The Brit Hadasha, which is just Hebrew for the New Testament portion, and that Matthew 5:38 through 42, Yeshua, or Jesus, transcends the sages' interpretation of an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth by teaching that we are to overcome evil by means of love. And it's always been that way. And it was encouraged even in the back in the day, because remember, you'd go to other laws. You didn't have to kill someone or do the harshest punishment. There were other laws that you could choose to show mercy to someone who effed you over big time. Yeshua's ethic of love trumps the exact demands required by the canons of justice. Note that Jesus not only teaches as if he had authority such as Moses, but abrogates Moses' teachings themselves, therefore implying his full authority and deity. The passage from Matthew 17:1 through 11 further indicates how Jesus was greater than Moses, who incidentally finally did make it to the promised land. Moses gave the Torah from Mount Sinai as a mediator between the people and the Lord, but Jesus stood upon the Mount of Transfiguration with both Moses and Elijah, the prophet, at his side. When Peter wanted to show honor to all three, the voice of the Father was heard from the cloud saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." Instead of Elijah or Moses, listen to Jesus. While Peter and the other two disciples heard the voice, they fell down terrified. Yeshua, or Jesus, then came and touched them, saying, "Rise and have no fear." And when they lifted up their eyes, they saw no one but Jesus. And this is a blessing for this week's Torah portion. Usually it will have a little speaker right next to it, but this one doesn't. This goes back into all of the judgments, and I feel like this is a great addition to our already established Torah reading. So I may do this from now on, where I'll read from the concordant, and then I'll jump over to this website. We have something from Lisa D. When my husband listens to his atheist channels, these verses seem to be a major problem. The ones about slavery and how you treat them. Yeah, because I think half of it is the fact that, for one thing, we're so traumatized by the type of slavery that we had here. There were essentially no laws that advocated for the rights of slaves. And that's the only type of slavery that we knew and experienced, and was at the very least so fresh in our memory as a nation of the United States of America. So we always think back to that. And there were no, like I said, no protections on those slaves. Like if a antebellum slave owner wanted to beat the crap out of a slave and his eye got messed up or his tooth got knocked out or he ended up dying because of it, the slave owner of that time, the antebellum himself, was not held accountable. But in the Torah, it explicitly states that if you as a slave owner beat your slave and they die, you are held accountable. If you beat your slave and a part of their body is damaged beyond repair, you are to set them free. They have, in a relative sense, earned their freedom. You cannot keep them. You've irreparably damaged them. So you cannot force them to work for you anymore. And on top of that, the only time where it is declared appropriate for them to be beaten is if and only if they break a commandment that demands that they be beaten in retribution for that particular sin. And even then, if you beat them and they die because of it, you are held accountable. So yeah, it's the comparing, and we can only go based off of what we know, is an old saying. I don't hold the atheists or those who are uncomfortable with these laws in any sort of bad light, because I often think the same too. Whenever you think of slavery, you don't think of the slavery that occurred back then. Not only did they have protections, not only were they to be set free after a certain amount of time, specifically if they were part of the Jewish community, but they were also in that slavery because that was how they lived. That's how they survived. Back in the day, if you didn't have the means of raising your own flock to keep you and your family alive, if you didn't have the means of perfecting a craft that was profitable, there was no way that you could survive. So you would go and sell your services, whether that be cooking, cleaning. Maybe when you were in the service of your master, you did learn a trade that you then used later on after you got freed. You would be provided for. All you would have to do is cook, clean, do the work that was assigned to you, and you were provided food, shelter, protection, and you had the option at the end of 7 years, after accumulating knowledge and skills, and even in some cases they were given money and flock. In the case of Jacob, when he went to go work for his uncle, because he worked for him for, what was it, like 14 plus years, because he had to work 7 plus years for Rachel and for her sister Leah, he earned the right to certain portions of his master's flock. So this is just how they did things back in the day. If you did not have a means of taking care of yourself or your family, you went and worked and was a slave for a person for a certain amount of time. And at the end of your 7 years, you could either choose to stay of your own accord, or you could have waited until you were freed, and you would take everything that you gained during that time with you. And in the case of the wife and the kids, I know that I've had some people come to me and say, well, isn't that a incentive for the slave to stay? And I would say it would be if they didn't know the law. As a Hebrew, they would know the law, and they were required to know the law. So they would know, hey, I've fallen in love with a fellow slave. I want to marry them. I want to have children with them, but I don't necessarily want to stay a slave forever. And I don't want to leave them and any children that come of this union behind. So they would most likely and rationally, I think, would choose to wait until they were freed. And then they would most likely buy their intended then. Or if a person was perfectly happy staying a slave, which is absolutely foreign to us, although back then there are people who didn't want to necessarily be responsible for themselves. And I would argue that there are some people today who even have this mentality where it's like they would rather rely on the care of other people than putting forth any effort to take care of themselves or acquiring a job. They would stay on particular programs. Maybe they are perfectly comfortable living amongst someone who is willing to take care of them. They don't put forth the effort. This whole idea of not necessarily wanting to take full accountability for running your life is not a new thing. It's always been a thing. There were people back in the day that actually chose slavery over being free because the safety, the food, the clothing, the way of life was so predictable. It was guaranteed. Whereas if you're off on your own in a scary Middle Eastern world, certainty isn't guaranteed. But your slave master, who seems to be doing pretty well, it is more likely than not guaranteed that you would have a meal. It was more likely than not that you had the protection of his house, that you would have a place to stay at night. So yeah, it's vastly different, Lisa. The thinking back in the day, the way things operated. Yeah, like I said, I don't hold people who are against it or put off by it accountable. We only know what we know, and what we know in the 21st century is antebellum slavery. It's not like the people had lots of choices 4,000 plus years ago. Yeah, They didn't have a lot of choices. And the only way you made money back in the day, the only way you survived was if you had a tradable skill or you were able to keep a flock alive. And if you weren't able to do both, you basically had to go and work for someone who did have that. I mean, I guess you could call it unfortunate if you apply it to, again, what we in the 21st century know. But back then, it was easy for people to go into slavery because, again, things were guaranteed. Your next meal was guaranteed. Your safety was guaranteed. The place where you were going to stay that night was guaranteed. And yeah, just like that, people stay in prison because they can't take care of themselves. There are some people who do commit crimes to where they're taken back into prison because they like being taken care of. They don't want to necessarily put forth the effort. And there's other people who are like that too. And I don't want to sound insulting to anyone who is on assisted living, but there are people who abuse the system of assisted living. And instead of going and doing anything productive, and I'm talking about only the people who abuse the system, not the people who are in dire need of it. There are people who are able to take care of themselves, but they choose to stay on assisted living because it's easy. It doesn't require a lot of effort. And I don't see how that thinking could be divorced from slavery back in the day. I think there were people who thought just like the way people who abuse the system today think, and they took advantage, as odd as that is to say, of slavery to have a somewhat easy, guaranteed, predictable life. And that concludes this portion of the Parashot. Unless anyone else has anything to add to what was covered today, I think I'm going to call it a day. I hope everyone has a very blessed Shabbos. And I will see you all next Wednesday, or this coming Wednesday, for the next installment of the Book of Mark series. So love, grace, and peace, everyone. Bye.